and welcome to LawWiser, India's first video-only knowledge-sharing platform for the legal community. And today we have an open virtual forum where we'll be discussing the dilemma in recycling plastics. And to discuss this, we have, esteemed panelists with us. So first, I'll give you a brief background of our discussion. As we all know, when plastics came in, nobody really had an idea initially when the use of plastic started, that what impact it could lead on the environment and human life. Over time, we all realize the impacts that it has, and there have been many legislations for that. One such critical one is plastic waste management rules. And there have been a lot of changes happening in that over time with respect to, for better management of plastic waste in India. And one such amendment that has happened, which is very recent, and it came in on September 17th. So as per this amendment now, recycled plastic could soon be used in storing, carrying, dispensing, and packaging of ready-to-eat food and drinks. And this has come as a surprise to many because this was also not part of an earlier any draft. So obviously this has come, as a surprise for many, and at the same time, many are critical about its impacts that it will have. At the same time, this would be done in consonance with FSSAI, as we all know. So obviously earlier the stand of FSSAI was different on this. Initially there was a ban in 2018. So this amendment is really a surprise. So to discuss this, I will introduce all our panelists. We have Mr. Vijay G. Habu. He is polymer scientist and adjunct professor, Institute of Chemical Technology, ICT Mumbai. We have Mr. Atin Biswas. He is program director at Center for Science and Environment. We have Mr. Siddharth Ghanshyam Singh. He's deputy program director at Center for Science and Environment. We have Mr. Sudipto Sarkar. He's advocate. He's practicing in Supreme Court, Delhi High Court, and also NGT. And we have Mr. Ashish Agarwal. He's secretary at Recycle India Foundation. One of the key, welcome all of the panelists, and thank you for taking time out for this open forum. So one of the keys for this, we all, as we actually take this conversation ahead, is to bring all different stakeholders, and that is why we have all our panelists from different backgrounds who can give their, valuable insights and inputs on this new amendment that has come, which is the Plastics Waste Management Amendment Rules 2021. So I will start this conversation as we've just shared the slide background on the amendment and recycling plastics. I will start with Mr. Dr. Vijay Habu, who can just explain us what would be the of allowing plastics for packaging of food and beverages industries. If you can start from that, or if you would like to share some background, would be great. Yeah.
As a person studied and researched and taught or teaching polymer science amongst various other materials. The uniqueness of polymers is that they are comprised of small molecules joined together to form long molecules, very, very long molecules, which is why the word polymer. Poly means many, mer means unit. Polymers manifest themselves in various forms, plastics being one of them. Textiles, elastomers, adhesives. So these are various manifestations of polymers. Polymers are unique compared to metals and other materials is because the same polymer molecule can be made into different molecular weights, that is different molecular sizes. Also, the internal structure, which is called crystalline structure of polymers, can be different for the same polymer. For example, the polyethylene, which is used for panni, is the same polyethylene that can be used for knee joint replacements, for high impact materials such as bulletproof jackets and everything, the same panni material, polyethylene. So polymer, this uniqueness is probably not there in all other materials. But what has happened is these polymers as a form of plastics have come recently into our lives. Because they have been so very useful, they came at a very rapid scale and rapid speed, both scale and speed. Whereas metals and other materials like wood, leather, natural fibers have been with us for thousands of years. So we know how to deal with them. We have equilibrated with them quite well. We know how to use them. We know how to make them. We know how to use them. We know how to dispose them. But that wisdom has not come to plastics because they have been with us very recently, 60, 70 years in the scale that we are seeing today. So therefore, we haven't reached the level of native intelligence of how to deal with them. And that is why we see the problem that people want to have the benefits of plastics, but they don't know how to dispose with it, dispose those things. Therefore, there is this big noise, on the one extreme, and there are extremist views. Some people will go and say, ban plastics, everything is bad about plastics. The other thing is everybody will say everything is good about plastics. But like with everything else, nothing is perfectly good, perfectly bad. For example, the classic case of pandemic, if there was no, even within plastics, there is single-use plastic. So people have tried to differentiate the plastics, long-life plastics, short-life plastics, within short-life plastics, single-use plastics. And quite rightly so, because when you are suddenly confronted with the problem of pollution, you need to do something about it. So you need to classify, and then these so-called single-use plastics came about. But imagine that if in this pandemic, if there was no same vilified single-use plastics weren't there, we wouldn't have survived. Literally, we wouldn't have survived. It may sound dramatic, but we wouldn't have survived. There wouldn't be masks, which are single-use plastics. There wouldn't be carry bags and things like that in which relief material was provided. There wouldn't be, RT-PCR, the tubes and everything, or the tubes which are single-use plastics. So these are, they are essential. So we are in a dilemma. And particularly the policymakers, they can't deny the utility. At the same time, none of us can deny what happens to them as a litter when they go into the litter. So what happens to litter? And different countries have different views on how to manage or what are their environmental problems. The Western countries are at a much level that they're worried about preserving fossil-based fuels. People at our end, we are more worried about street litter. And these are all as a consequence of the different geopolitical realities of each country. So a remedy of one country cannot be applied as a remedy to our country. Our uniqueness is different. For example, the kind of bottom of the pyramid rack picker system that we have is nowhere in the world, or maybe in a few neighboring countries. But this is the system which has provided us with 60% recycling rate for all plastics, for a particular PET, 85-90% plastic. So those kinds of high recycling rates happen because of collection, and the collection is happening because of this system. Now, the recycling currently in India is happening in the mechanical, primarily the world over, it is mechanical recycling. Means what? You take the used plastics, you melt them and then recast them. And that is possible because the word itself is thermoplastic. Although we use the word truncated word plastic, the correct name is thermoplastic, the full name. Thermo means heat, like thermometer. So thermoplastic, plasticose means a material that can be given shape. Under the action of heat is thermoplastic. So if it can be given shape once, it can be given shape twice, thrice, four. So that is how the word recycling comes. So they can be recycled in number of times. Of course, with every recycling, there will be some kind of alterations. And it is these alterations that we need to be aware of from a polymer science of view, what they can do. You have a polymer resin, which is converted into shaped articles like plastics. You can have combs, toys, bags, bottles, chashma, whatever it is. So these are all shaped. These are all different plastics. We all use the one single word plastics, but not knowing that there are these different plastics. Just like there are different metals, and depending on the property, use different metals for different purposes. You have aluminum cookers, but you don't have an aluminum hathoda. Okay, so different metals are used for different purposes. Same thing is for plastics, for different properties. Therefore, their problems upon recycling will also be different. But if these plastics, or what is common is every time you melt them for making a new plastic, there is going to be some amount of change in the basic polymer structure. So these changes are not fully known. And particularly when the polymer goes through multiple cycles of recycling, we will not even know that this material that I'm now processing, some part of it is going to have seen 3 recycles, some could have been 10 recycles, some could have been 30. There is no control. Therefore, the hodgepodge that gets molten is not appropriate for food, because then we are increasing the risk. Because we don't know, for no country in the world has fully mapped, no country, not just India, no country in the world has mapped the consequences of multiple recycling and the accumulation of the contaminants in the polymer. Added to that, there is a unique situation in India. Our used plastics are used for a whole host of horrible things that we can't even imagine. Some people will use bottles for as a toilet tumbler. Somebody will use it for putting I can't even mention, but some diesel and blood and all sorts of things. And these things will come into the recycling stream, which is generally supposed to take care of it, but not all. Once you open up the lock and allow it to use it, then all sorts of variations in the sophistication levels of recycling will emerge, and they will all come into this food packaging. And that is where my fear is. For the moment, I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, because this really helped audience understand what all impact and the risk it can create. At the same time, explaining in detail about the process for recycling plastic, which now, as you mentioned, if any of the other panelists has any other inputs on this and you would like to share your thoughts, we can, yeah, Atin.
Yeah, it was excellent to hear Dr. Habbu speak. I have only one submission. I mean, he's an eminent academician, so I don't really qualify to even challenge his his interpretation. My only submission to him is that the number that basically we are getting from the government. He mentioned that we are recycling 60% of plastics that we are collecting in India. If that was true, then India has to be a country from the future.
That's true. Actually, that's what will actually take us to our next question as well, which is also relatable to what you just said, since we don't know how, what percentage of plastic is being recycled. But what we still are aware of that, although recycling plastic has challenges, the another one is that majority share of recycling it is contributed by the informal sector. And there is no well-researched or defined standards on paper for, obviously recycling plastic in India yet, unlike USA and EU, who are still moving at a better pace than us. So, Ashish, since you work on that sphere, if you can, share your thoughts, how will this impact the informal sector now? And does this amendment also create the need to now get proper standards or rules for managing the informal sector?
Good morning, everyone, all the panelists. Firstly, ma'am, we at Recycling India oppose this move. And we will just be resonating what Mr. Habbu has said. He has given proper insights about how recycling is done and breaking up in a very detailed manner what he has done. And coming to Mr. Atin, the thing is that we are just speaking on government stats right now. Like the government has given up a stat that 60% of the plastic is recycled and 90 to 95% of the PET bottles are recycled in India. Second, coming to the topic of the informal sectors, ma'am, we'd like to inform you that India is the largest recycler, one of the largest recyclers in this world because of the informal sector. Comparing US and EU to because they are completely based on formal sector. The thing is that informal sector where rag pickers and the kabadi walas, they can penetrate into places where the formal sector cannot. It's difficult for them to penetrate and get the work done quickly. So as such, informal sector, India is one of the major upcomings of the recycling is because of the informal sector that India is right now. Secondly, the government is acknowledging the informal sector and the rag pickers right now. Recently, like some time back, our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, had acknowledged the work of the rag pickers by calling them and washing their feet. It was done. We as individuals, we need to try to acknowledge more of the informal sector, try to educate them, try to give them proper standards and educations for them to increase this percentage to another level. But informal sectors, as we tend to do, they are the unsung heroes of the country. We believe that they are the unsung heroes of the countries and they are required as such of our knowledge.
True. Well said, Ashish. Obviously, that does, give us the idea that there is a need to regulate them. Anyone has a thought on this? Udipto, what do you think on this?
So, I mean, I actually agree with Ashish that they are definitely the unsung heroes of whatever little recycling is going on as on date. And I won't just say unsung heroes, but the reality is that at least in our country, I won't speak for what's happening abroad, but at least in our country, it's really not possible to create any system of recycling, downcycling, whatever you wish to call it, without involving these individuals. We clearly, whether we like it or not, these individuals clearly do play a very important part and a very important role in this entire process. However, my only concern is, and this is not something new which I'm raising, it's been on for quite some time, is that obviously the standards of how they operate, or the standards of living, or the standards of how they actually collect, this does require some sort of not just regulation, but they require at level some sort of help. Because when you look at these individuals who are actually doing it, they're doing it, I mean, I'm going to be extremely blunt here, they're doing it purely as a source of income. They're from very rural and very poor background, and for them it's an opportunity to earn money. So probably they're not even actually concerned about what the consequences may be for them. So obviously we, when we are in this slightly higher pedestal and we get this opportunity to hold and be part of this discussion, I think what we should be considering even in regulation is how to make life slightly better for them when they are doing this job, because they're going to continue doing this job whether we like it or not, because they don't know of any other source as on date, right? If they did, then they would have been doing that. They wouldn't be involved in this sector now. But since this is part of their job and they have chosen it to be part of this to be a part of their job, how is it that we can actually make life slightly safer and better for these individuals? That's where I feel regulation is required.
True. Very well said. Actually, that also takes us to the next part of it. We all know that in 2018, FSSAI had actually banned the use of recycled plastic for packaging foods from July 2019. And then this addition of new rules of Plastic Waste Management Amendment Rules 2021 is a complete opposite of that. And they have to be done, these standards have to be set in, in consultation with FSSAI. So if you can, so Dipto, share your thoughts on, can these new rules be considered in harmony with the others, which obviously doesn't appear so? And can such rules be really introduced without any proper consultation?
Well, to answer your second question first, yes, as per law, they can be. Should they be? I personally feel that no, they should at least have been some sort of basic consultation. And actually, just to clarify, there were actually two 2021 amendments. There was one in August, and then there was this recent one in September, which brought in that para, which is now, which has become a controversial para, it seems. The August 2021, my personal opinion, it was actually something very good, because it was clarifying. I've written on this in the past as well, that 2016 and 18 rules created a lot of confusion, especially in terms of who was a producer, who was a brand owner. I mean, there was a sheer problem of compliance and how to comply with these new rules. Who is in fact even supposed to fill that form and register with the Pollution Control Board? That itself became a fresh headache. And I have some clients who started receiving notices and they said, we don't mind complying, but how do we comply to this? Right. So that became a big issue. So I felt that the August 2021 amendment actually brought in a lot of clarity in that regard. So it's going to make compliance much easier, at least for the commercial side of things.
Yeah.
The September 2021, which, yes, I agree, has come as a surprise to everybody, it seems, except for perhaps the bureaucrats themselves who actually planned this. When I read them, I don't think per se there's a conflict in language, but I do think there's a conflict, or at least a change in thought of how they want to now proceed with this problem. Because if you look up right till 2018, right, or even August 2021, and including the FSSAI regulation which came in first, the thought process was that we need to curtail the use of plastic absolutely in certain areas. Right? And that's what you see in the August 2021 amendment, when they bring in that list of criteria of items, which are absolutely banned, which you cannot make out of plastic at all. For example, earbuds, to give an example. What appears to have happened in September 2021, and I'll come to whether it's good or bad later, but what appears to have happened is a change of thought, where
Yeah.
you are encouraging recycling in certain areas of packaging, of use of plastics, of polymers, because you are of the opinion, and I'm speculating a bit here, but it appears you're of the opinion that they can have a good, not only, of course, are they highly recyclable in the first place, but also that they can have a good, create a good cyclical system in the economy itself. Because, like I said, we can't ignore, and of course, as Dr. Habbu has also stated quite correctly, we can't just simply ignore the importance of plastics in our life today. They do have their part to play.
Significant.
However, what I do, what is my concern here is that, at least till date, I checked till today morning, I didn't see any consultation by FSSAI on this till now.
Yeah.
But I agree that there are certain types of plastics which are definitely more recyclable than others. So, for example, PET plastics are definitely more recyclable than certain other forms of plastics. However, if you're going to look at recyclable plastic or plastic which is, recycled plastic which is merged with virgin plastic, the hard reality is, and this applies across the world. I'm not aware of any entity or any organization which has managed to actually find a solution to this. You cannot determine the percentage of recyclable plastic to the actual percentage use of virgin plastic. You are counting and you're putting faith and trust upon the individual or the entity or the institution which has actually done that or claims to have done that in the first place. But we have no basis to actually check how much was done in the first place, right? So the problems aside of whether this should be in food packaging or not in the first place, the fact of the matter is when you don't know how to even check to see how much recycling is happening in the first place, be it in food packaging or be it in any other area, then how do you even enforce such a regulation? The FSSAI is free to come up with standards, as it should. But then how does FSSAI intend to enforce these regulations in the first place?
Thank you, Sudhir. So that actually does help our audience understand this issue much better. Siddharth, you can also share your thoughts since you have written extensively on this and these rules that have just come up. So if you would like to, share your thoughts here.
Yeah. So I would just kind of I agree to the fact that use of recycled plastics for food contact applications is an idea that I think is ahead of its time. Not only for a country like India, but even countries in the European Union are also kind of struggling. They've not been able to take a call on whether they should actually incorporate the use of recycled plastics for food contact applications. Although the US EPA has they have a set protocol in place, and it's quite a robust system that they have. The problem with our country is, I think Atin pointed that out, but just to kind of reiterate, right? And until and unless, we actually know the quantum of waste that we are dealing with, you can't really have a roadmap or a strategy to deal with that quantum of any material, right? So I have in all my publications I have at least mentioned this once, that we as a country are not actually sure of the amount of plastic waste that we are generating. We have several figures which I would believe that they are still underestimates. Even the study that was done by CPCB, it was published in 2015. I think the number they gave was around 9.4 or 9.5 million metric tons, which was done at the dump sites. Now, I think all of us will agree here that all the valuable plastic is taken out of the entire municipal solid waste gamut before it actually reaches the dump site. So even this 9.5 million metric ton is an underestimate, right? But if you, on the other hand, look at the latest annual report that CPCB has come up with, the plastic waste management annual report for the year 2019-20, they have said that India has produced around 3.4 or 3.5 million metric tons of plastic waste. Now, this is a 60% decrease from the 2015 figure, right? So point number one is that we do not know how much we are generating, right? That is the issue. The second point I would kind of want to add to is what Ashish and Sudipto were sharing about the informal sector. I kind of, we have worked extensively. I have a colleague at CSE who has done a report on the informal sector, what are the strategies to integrate them. While on one hand, I kind of believe that, if it was not for the informal sector, we would have drowned in our own waste, right? Because they are the ones who are actually clearing it up. But the issue is when they actually, the strength that they have is the reach, the collection, the network that they have, right? That's the strength. The weakness that they have is when it comes to the scientific process, right? So the moment that they put their hands into scientific or rather unscientific methods of recycling, that is where it all goes wrong. So we need a mechanism where we can utilize the strength of the informal sector and kind of weave it with the formal sector, and then maybe we will have some system in place. That's what my opinion is on the informal sector. And the third point I would like to just make quickly here is, I have seen a lot of plastic carry bags with a stamp on them which says that this is not a plastic bag, right? And I'm very sure all of you have seen that. I have seen, compostable plastic, and then oxo-biodegradable plastic, every kind of terminology that you can use, right? And also, the rules have kind of promoted the use of compostable plastics, which I find very concerning, because it's very difficult. I think Dr. Habu can also comment on this, but it's practically impossible to make out if a plastic is compostable or not, just by looking at it, touching it, or any other means. Moreover, when I say that as a state or as a country, I am promoting compostable plastics, you are ending up giving a wrong message that littering that compostable plastic is fine, right? And you can put it in your home compost bin, or you can put it in your community compost bin, and then the problem is solved. But that's not the case, right? These compostable plastics need proper industrial composting facilities. Now, my question basically here is, how many of these industrial composting units do we have in our country? There is no data around that. Again, we come down to data, right? So we have come a whole circle. Yes. We have solutions, and then it all boils down to that, we don't
exactly. That's true. So that we can actually take this more in detail. Mr. Habu has something to say, but actually I have the next question for Dr. Habu only. And it is relatable to what Siddharth was actually saying, where we go on, all these composting plastics and everything. Along with what you have to say, if you can also answer us, what are the sustainable or alternatives for the packaging of food? Because the other question that we will be also asked towards the end is, although we all are criticizing it, but what are the options that are available? So, please, Dr. Habu, take over.
First, I have to compliment Siddharth. It's rare to find, science, taking, the basis being the basis of discussion. So, bang on, and Mr. Atin Biswas also. So, numbers, science, it should be the basis for driving policies, not sentiments, not what banner brigades keep doing, either this way or that way. I'm saying it should be cool, composed discussions such as what is happening now. People who are serious about the topic, and then they take the discussions forward. So I'll start with what Mr. Siddharth just said about compostable and biodegradable. Polymers or plastics were designed, invented to be durable. So whether made from bio, see, these are the words bio, Ayurveda, these are, catchy words. We generally tend to believe that the moment you attach a prefix bio and Ayurvedic, it's like, panacea, and it's like a God-given thing. It's not. A lot of mischief happens because of that. Once whether the monomers, that is the raw materials, are plant-based or petroleum-based, once they polymerize, it's as durable as any other polymer. Now, to make, not that it cannot be altered. So the alteration happens by addition of additives, whether it's a biodegradable additives, compostable additives, which means what is happening is, there is a polymer molecule, a very robust molecule. The whole thing was invented. Plastics were invented to serve mankind. That we needed some durable material, lightweight material, affordable material, safe material, inert material. Otherwise, we know natural materials like cotton and other things, they gather stain, they are moth-proof and everything, and where synthetic materials do not. So plastics were invented to overcome these deficiencies in traditional materials. Now, if you add these additives, whether as Siddharth rightly recounted, you have so many designations: biocompostable, oxo-degradable, compostable. The additives cause disintegration, which means the fragmentation of, so at least a big thaili, at least you can see it and pick it up. But once it degrades under so-called degrade, it will break into small fragments which will not even be pickable. And then it will remain in the system, and then it will enter the food chain which we are talking about. So actually, these are very, I don't know, sorry, I don't want to say things, but the government should have consulted subject opinions and taken a call before going so much on this compostable. And the second thing which Siddharth alluded to is absolutely correct. Two things he said. One is this false feeling that when the citizens, abhi mere ko फेंकना में problem नहीं है, because वो compostable है, वो फेंकी जाएगी, वो ऑटो कुछ तो होगा, फुस वो कल की जो थैली है वो निकल जाएगी हवा में. That doesn't happen. That. And even the test certificates, which a lot of people say कि हमने तो test किया government ने लिखने के अनुसार, भैया, but that test conditions is done in the clinical conditions in the laboratory. The actual flora and fauna in the biota that is available in the landfills are nowhere in reality what the probably ISO 1088 will tell you. So it is some kind of, in my opinion, a deceptive thing. And the third thing which he said is absolutely correct is there is no way to distinguish a virgin polymer versus a recycled polymer. The FTIR, that is Fourier transfer infrared spectroscopy, or whatever technique you want to do, I don't want to bombard with a lot of science, but if you take any analytical technique and you measure, let's say, a version nice PET bottle, it will give you certain peaks, like an ECG of the PET bottle, let's call it. And if you took a recycled PET, it will give the same ECG. So how do you distinguish one from the other? And this has two very important ramifications. One is that there is going to be a huge spawning of false claims because now the government has allowed it. So everybody will say, this contains, my bottle contains 60% recycled. Somebody will say, no, my contains 62%, so mera kharid le lo. So, this kind of thing based purely on false claims will happen. Number two, should something go wrong, let's say in the case of, for a fantastic material like PET, which is virgin PET, a good material, world over used, there are in India allegations that it contains BPA, bisphenol A, phthalates. As an academician, I feel like, committing a suicide when somebody says PET contains bisphenol A. The chemistry is different. It's like saying pulao mein gehu mil gaya. Arre, pulao is a rice-based material. It mein gehu nahi aa sakta. To usme bhi there are allegations. So now you open up recycling material, you don't know who in what area is going to add that thing, you don't know. So there is this false sense which people will say ki abhi to kya biodegradable hai. And let us ask it, this environmental thing is supposed to, the policies are meant to kind of clear whether 60%, and I think Mr. Biswas rightly said that, and when I teach, I say the same thing. What you cannot measure, it cannot be managed. You have to measure. Data is important. So, but in term, when it comes to plastics, until Professor Jambek came out with her paper in 2015, nobody had this data. So not even the Vora Sahab. So there is no need for us to flagellate ourselves. We are as poor as the Western world is. And also there is no claim to know whether her data is right or wrong. Because there is no data, we are taking this 8.3 billion tons have been produced in the world so far. We are presenting that thing merrily. We are accepting that figure. We are not challenging that, but we are challenging our own government's figures. We should also be very clear that, and gathering this data on these kinds of materials is not easy. It's not a milligram level of accuracy you can get. These are gross materials. You cannot have this data of the accuracy that we want to know. Recycling happens in not 60%, but 48.39% recycling. It is not possible. You have to work on these things in a gross level. My worry comes in this kind of thing. Once you allow this, coming back to food packaging, what stunned me was, let us assume the older plastic waste management tools. Even the 2016, if you take as a baseline, 18th March until 12th of August, which Mr. Sudipto mentioned, a very correct thing. So 5.5 years, we were prohibiting the use of recycled materials, which means the government was concerned about the health effects. What happened between 12th of August and 17th of September that day? It's literally 180 degrees. They have just changed two words. Can not be used ki jagah they shall not ki jagah can use kiya. The shall not have been replaced with can. I mean, this 180 degrees reversal in the outlook of the safety without consulting, toxicologists or something like that. It's mind-boggling. But later on, recently, I think about last week, the EPR draft guidelines have come. That gave me a clue of what must have gone into their thinking. Government is also, I'm not saying that they don't apply their minds. They must have, some thought must have gone there. I don't know what. So the EPR guidelines say, and they have given a kind of year-wise breakup that this year, some X percent, next year 20%, next year 30%, and by 2026, 60% of recycled plastics have to be used. Now, I was aghast here. In Europe, there is this single-use plastic directive whose number is 2019/904. Europe, a country which, I mean, look, let's be clear, all the plastic and all technology हम लोगों ने गोरा साहब से सीखा है. उनके problem भी हमसे सीख रहे हैं, and then we are working on it. None of this is an Indian invention. Even the chlorofluorocarbons were an invention there. They got a problem. They changed to hydrofluorocarbons. We did the same thing. So we are also Me Too country. So if they are also, and then that directive which I mentioned, 2019/904, it is, anybody can look it up. Article 6 says that by 2025, for beverage bottles, they are aiming to reach 25% recycled only by 2025. And 30% recycled they are aiming to reach by 2030. So they are going so cautiously. And here we are saying by 2026, 60% laga dene ka. So 2030, advanced countries where there is social discipline and where there are very clean collection systems and processing systems and fair, not that there are no crimes there, but fairly, the index of, integrity is slightly higher. There, they are going cautiously that wanting to reach 30% up by 2030. Hum 2026 tak dhadalle se 60% we are allowing that thing. I don't know. I mean, so rather than, we should have done is wait, watch them, what are their experience, because this is of course the health related problem, but
yes,
it is also a logistics related problem. They are allowing the use of recycled material after putting in place a very robust tracking and tracing system, which means every recycled flake that comes in will have a history tag to it. That means ये bottle कहाँ से आ गई, किस area से आ गई, किसके लिए use हुई थी, ये cola bottle थी या juice bottle थी या पानी bottle थी. Every tracking mechanism is there. And once that digitized tracking mechanism is there, it will go to designated recycling. So, is tarah se very controlled way they are allowing these recycled plastics for food contact materials. And here is a situation where we don't have basic data, whether it is 60%, 48%, and we are allowing. So you have recycling hubs in Malegaon, in Ghazipur, in Jaunpur, I don't know where, all these kinds of things, and we are allowing food grade material. This is my biggest concern. And even the proviso that subject to FSSAI, I looked up that Act 36 of 2006 ऐसा कुछ उन्होंने mention किया, I forget that exact thing. I think Mr. Biswas and Sudip and Ghansham Siddharth, they would probably be able to find out that exact Act 36 of 2006 ऐसा कुछ उन्होंने mention किया है. That subject to FSSAI that thing. वो act मैंने पढ़ा. Entire act of some 59-60 pages, there is not a word. I did a word count search. There is no word recycle there. There is no word plastic there. So what am I supposed? So you are saying that recycling is allowed subject to FSSAI's XYZ Act. When I open that act, there is no clue for me to say किस आधार पे I should take a decision कि मैं उसमें जाऊं या नहीं जाऊं. So already when virgin material, there are accusations, allegations, in my opinion, totally wrong. I know what each polymer, how it is made. For a good plastic like PET, there are allegations. And now you open up recycled plastic, which a whole variety of recycling protocols are adopted. You allow it for food contact. To my mind, this is mind-boggling. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Habu, also, if you can just share those, sustainable alternatives as well. Like that is also left out.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that. I'm a teacher, so you'll have to bear with me. So once I start.
Yes.
So I'll
Yes,
try to
we will
control
do that.
myself.
And then I think Sudipto had something to say, right? He did raise his hand. So we'll take Sudipto and then we'll move on to our next question then. Please, Dr. Habu.
So shall I say
Yes,
or shall
yes, please.
See, alternatives we need to understand. Why did plastics come? Because the traditional materials had some deficiencies, and to overcome that, plastics were invented. It is said in World War I, more soldiers died out of frostbites than bullet wounds because there was no good sturdy synthetic material. That's why synthetic materials, polymer science came. Plastics came. Now you invent something, and this plastics material got invented after 2,500 years. Please understand. When the last in Mahabharata time, silk was known, wood was known, metals were known. Subsequently, 500 BC, glass was known, paper was known. So from 500 BC, the latest invention of a new material, it took 1907 to come out with a plastic. So it took 2,500 years to invent a new material. Now to suddenly expect that I will be able to find a new material which will have no problems with the traditional materials and shall not have the problems with plastics tomorrow because there is a banner brigade. It is not going to happen. Yes, things will speed it up because advanced science, scientific techniques and understanding is there. So you can speed it up, but I don't see there is going to be an alternative, which is then there is a Habu matrix. Those of you who have probably attended my lecture, there are 5 things. It needs to satisfy 5 things. One is that it should be functionally equivalent. A bag for a bag is not an alternative. अरे पहले paper bag नहीं use करते थे क्या? But paper bag is not a functionally equivalent of a plastic bag. Paper bag gets wet. I live in Mumbai, and the rains, even in October, just last night, there was such heavy rains. It was curtains of rain, water falling down. Try and step out of your home with a paper bag with important documents. So plastic brings with it certain functionality, which other materials, so one is functionally equivalent. The alternative, the other is it should be environmentally safe. Paper is not environmentally safe, contrary to its benign image that is created. It releases a lot of, it is made using a huge amount of water and chemicals for pulping and involve a lot of energy for drying of the pulp. So environmentally footprint should also be computed over its entire life cycle. So third is safety. A lot of these materials that are going to get awards in these exhibitions and everything, it's good to have a certificate from Ministry X or some this association are great and clap it. These are not going to be scalable. It's scalable, like some kind of guy comes with this thing, paper kagzi karke bottle. I am reading it on WhatsApp and everything. That paper bottle itself, the process, the pulp making process, the drying process, the disinfection process is going to have lingering chemicals on that thing. So safety. So feces, on the basis of which you should say whether a certain thing is alternative available or not. Yes, wherever we can, we should avoid it. There is no need for wrapping, my bouquet on the plastic, these things. There is no need for plastic flags. There is no need for, I saw the other day on WhatsApp, a nariyal was wrapped in a shrink film, plastic film. This is crazy. Why do you need that plastic? Crazy. So just because then somebody said, because the barcode has to be stuck on it, that's why. So which means the mall ka jo till operator hai, till manager hai, uski suvidha ke liye we are introducing plastic. This is crazy. So we need to be sensible about it. Yes, it is useful. Doesn't mean you should go berserk and do that kind of thing. At the same time, no need to go to the other extreme and just ban karo, ban karo, ban karo. So alternatives to come to that thing. Some alternatives, for example, हमारे ज़माने में we used to have in public lunch and everything केले के पत्ते पे खाते थे. Go back to that thing, and now the same Germans वो पत्रावली करके जो हम लोग सदियों से पन्ने के बनते थे cups, हम लोग उसको धुतकारा हम लोगों ने. Now those guys are coming with some brand names in German, white and dark करके German नाम सुनेगा तो अच्छा लगता है. We pay 10 times more. So there are wherever possible alternatives, please use them. But don't expect that, a revolution will come after 10, within 10 years or something. That is my humble opinion. But I do wish that if there is some new material which is invented, which has no problems, the ones that you're facing in plastics, no problem.
Great.
Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Habu. And Sudipta, you had something to add on. Yes.
Yeah, so I just had 2 points to say here, and I agree to a large part with what Dr. Habu has been lecturing us on, and a good lecture. I'm not saying that in a derogatory manner. I quite enjoyed listening to him. One is, of course, he very correctly found the ambiguity in our laws, in our regulations, which of course, lawyers like me thrive. So I personally, at least as part of my profession, I don't mind that, because that's how I earn my daily bread and butter. But yes, he's right when he says that there's a clear lack of, there's a clear ambiguity and a lack of clarity on who should go where. Like I said, even with the 2016 rules, till the August 2021 amendment, the industry, all your FMCG companies, all your manufacturing companies, all of them are facing the same problem: what to do, what not to do. The second point which I want to raise, and which Dr. Habu did indirectly raise, is that I personally feel that a lot of our discussion, and I don't mean this discussion, but in general, the discussion which we have on plastic recycling and how to do it, is getting hijacked by marketing hype. So for example, when Siddharth and Dr. Habu speak about data, they're absolutely right that there is incomplete data. But why is it that the same old data keeps dropping up again and again? Because you have this marketing hype which keeps dropping it back up, saying that, look, this is the data, therefore we will use this, and therefore look, see our comparison to this data and how good a job we are doing. And it's not as if any single entity or institution is to blame. It's become a problem throughout our industry and our institutions, where everybody is trying to justify, because sustainability has now become, the next big thing in our across the world, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But then to use that word and to use that phrase in a very convoluted manner is, I feel, causing more problems than solving them, right? And when we look at some of our, like Dr. Habu very correctly pointed out, there are certain items which, for example, banana leaves, or for example, I don't know, when we used to have chart in the initial days, like 2 decades back, they used to be made of natural, I don't know, beetle leaves or what leaves they were, but they used to be naturally put together, and we used to have chart in those. We never used to use those plastic cups or anything. We had a lot of processes, or at least a lot of items made of natural materials, which are quite useful for us on a daily basis, and which were doing a reasonably good job. Maybe not a perfect job all the time, but a reasonably good job. We seem to have forgotten a lot of them, or we seem to have moved on in this preference towards plastic. So that's where I feel we can actually cut back. We can actually bring us back to those old systems which clearly were working for us.
True.
For the long
Actually,
distance.
that's how we realized, Sudipta and Dr. Habu, that how plastic has taken over our lives, even for the basic things where it wasn't really required. And, as you pointed about the FSSAI and all of that earlier, That takes us to our next question, probably the last one that we have before we take recommendations from each one of you all. And this is directed to Atin and Siddharth. So, what would be the role of FSSAI and BIS in setting these standards? And also, we are, to an extent aware whether there has been any consultation or no with these bodies or not. So if you can just, share some thoughts on this as well before we just, quickly wrap up and take up to the last recommendations as well.
Yeah, I think Siddharth is a better person to take this question. So let Siddharth respond first, then I'll join if I have anything else to add.
Okay, thanks, Atin. I think, Sania, you have gone through my article. I will also probably put it in the chat box so that everyone can refer to that. But me and Atin were having a discussion around, like Dr. Habu mentioned, this is a not only, plastic waste management rules 2016, but also if you go back and refer to the 2011 plastic waste management rules, or maybe the 2009, this was always on the agenda that we have to make sure that recycled plastic do not come in contact with your food products, right? So this is not this is like a complete U-turn. So I literally have very I don't have any idea as to what triggered this change in the clause or this amendment to come up with, but one thing that I think Atin had mentioned is, it should have been the other way around. Like the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change cannot come up with a notification saying that, we will start using recycled plastic for food contact applications. It has to be the FSSAI that initiates this discussion and says that, okay, we are in a position to, kind of, or maybe both of them should have done a consultation starting, and because there was no consultation involved, so we don't have any idea as to why this was done. As far as the BIS is concerned, we have the last recycling standards that we have is from the year 1998, right? Post 1998, we did not have any amendments or any revisions in the standards that we have to follow for recycling our plastic. And even if you go back and refer to the 98 document, it doesn't talk much about the technologies that we can use, the level of contamination that may or may not be allowed. So basically it kind of dodges all the right questions, and it focuses on marking and labeling, right? Now, marking and labeling is, I think someone was mentioning about marketing, right? So marking and labeling is very much a part of your marketing strategy, right? And at this point of time, companies are kind of fighting to come across as brands that are environmentally responsible, right? Even if they are not, it holds a much more communication value at this point of time rather than anything else, right? So if I say that, and that's the reason why we see so many of these voluntary initiatives, right? इतना बीच से हमने प्लास्टिक निकाल दिया, right? My question is, आपने बीच से निकालने के बाद what facility did you send it to, right? Was it getting recycled? What percentage of 100 tons that you collected got recycled? What did you have to throw off in the dump site? Again, data, right? So the initiatives that we have, right? These voluntary initiatives are kind of, they're good. I'm not saying that they don't need to happen, but the very same thing, if you kind of include it in a policy and then say the corporations to do it, they will shy away from doing that. But voluntary initiatives is, they are very that also gives them a brand promotion opportunity. Now, apart from this, I would just want to add one more thing, that's around the fact of as a consumer, today, let's say I go to a supermarket and I want to shop, right? As a consumer, I am limited by the options, by the packaging options that the corporations are offering, right? If I'm an environmentally conscious consumer and I want to buy my, let's say, Dant Manjan in a tin packaging, I should have that option, right? So the corporations are kind of, you know, depriving me of my right to buy a product in a certain package, and everything is plastic, right? So that's where I think I have a problem with. As consumers, we should have the choice to buy
Exactly.
what we want to, right? And I think Atin,
True.
if you would want to add something to that.
I actually have nothing else to add. I just want to add one point, just with a quick reference to the 3 back-to-back notifications that we have seen being issued by the ministry. One is the phasing out of single-use plastic. The second one was probably on the allowing recycled plastic in food grade use, and the third one was an EPR, right? Now, see, India has a very rich tradition of having excellent policies, and then equally poor in implementing them. When we introduced EPR, and EPR was something else, something that we borrowed from other countries. As an idea, it was excellent. But can somebody please Google and get a report on what is the status of implementing EPR in the last 5 years in India, right? So the apprehension is, even if these policies are to be appreciated, I do really appreciate. There is a politics in everything. We live in a country that is ruled by political parties, and then the bureaucrats basically are there to support them, and I appreciate that. Every democracy functions the same way. Now, I want to give you a quick reference of the item that has been listed for phasing out in the first notification that we had in August. If you look at those items, and I would urge, when you find time, please go and have a look at the items. Other than the earbuds, which you can associate with a company who is very famous for producing earbud and has a big brand value, the remaining 19 items does not have a brand and is not produced by the big giants. When we know for a fact that 60% of the plastic is basically plastic waste is basically a contribution of packaging, and then there are handful of 5-6 brands who are basically introducing those material, because as a country we can't even ask a company that tell us how much plastic have you used to introduce the portfolio of products that you have introduced. Is that difficult? When we are asking about EPR, that you have to ensure that you are collecting back the plastic that you have introduced. What is my denominator?
Exactly.
What is my denominator? And then we are confusing corporate social responsibility with extended producer responsibility. And I'll give you a classic example on that. I'm not going to name any brand because that's not the objective of this discussion. I was coming across that 5 companies have taken a pledge of creating a fund of 150 crore to clear up plastic products or collect plastics, right? Basically that. And then when I checked their investment on the brand marketing through television commercials, they spent 10 times more cost, right? So what did they do on that front? When they are investing, when they are voluntarily spending, the India has given them a circular that you have to spend 2% of your net profit for social cause. Now you decide why you are going to put your money on. Now, I have to now mention a brand, otherwise this argument won't stand firm. Say ITC. ITC was earlier into tobacco manufacturing. Now they're into FMCG, and they're one of the biggest brand in India in FMCG business today, right? So when ITC pledged that I'm going to spend 150 crore or ITC, Nestle, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, Hindustan Unilever, Procter & Gamble, these are big brands, right? If you look at how much money they are spending on branding their products, which is several thousand crore every year. So they don't disclose how much virgin plastic they're using to produce what the products that they're releasing into the market. How would you measure them? So CSR
Right,
is
Atul.
not EPR. EPR is a legal mandate, and if EPR has to be implemented, the institutional arrangement, right from the union government to
True.
a city government, has to be put in place. That's
Right,
it.
Atul, right. And in fact, that's what takes us from there, knowing that probably there should be actually proper legislation rather, or something that enforced that talks about how this virgin plastic is also managed. A lot of work needs to be done there, and it's basically a step-by-step process that needs to be done. We are just jumping onto one thing to the other straight away without following any proper process or the data. But that takes us to the last leg of our discussion, and we'll quickly wrap up because we have one or two questions as well from our audience as well. So if you all could quickly just take one minute each and share your recommendations that you think would be suitable for these amendments, or you think there are any other action items that should be followed. Starting with Atin, if you could just take up a minute and share that.
See, I mean, with regard to the topic that we have for today's discussion, my submission is very simple. What already Dr. Habbu mentioned and a couple of other panelists have mentioned, we should immediately hold this notification for implementation. We should go back. We should consult the people who are qualified to talk about whether it should be allowed or whether it should be allowed with certain safety net. Right? Ideally, this notification of allowing plastic should have incorporated specific recommendation from FSSAI. We have those standards in the US. They are also allowing recycled plastic in food grade use, but they're allowing it with certain standards to adhere to. So that's my one liner, that it should be immediately put on hold, and that's it.
Great. Ashish, your recommendation or your
I'll-
action items for this?
I'll be resonating the same what Mashratna said. We need to oppose this as of now. We need to consult because the government has no specific standard as of now, like what to do, what not to do. So we need to consult people who will be able to give a proper idea about it. As simple as that. This should not go forward as we are concerned, as far as we are concerned.
So that your take here.
What I think is, like if you just have a look at the paragraph that has changed,
Yeah.
it's not that tomorrow our food contact applications will food material will have packaging with recycled. So that's not the case, right? So until and unless FSSAI comes up with some notification saying that this is the amount of recycled plastic that will be used for this application, right? So my submission is, first we need to have an inventory of the recycling technologies that we have in the country, right? That's my point number one. More or less the recycling principles may vary, right? So we need to focus on how many different principles are we following. Of those, what are the principles that can be allowed for this kind of application, right? There may be the case that all of them fail, but to kind of arrive to that conclusion, we need to do certain exercise, right? Now, moreover, let's say a few of them pass, a few of the recycling technologies pass, then we need to find out what are the kind of food that may be packaged in using recycled plastic. Now again, I hope that these are certain recommendations, even to arrive at that this is something that we need to scrap. Even to arrive to this decision, we need to do this exercise in order to kind of have a basis to say that ye nahi kar sakte.
Exactly. So Dipto, your quick take on this.
So actually, I have a slightly more broader suggestion in mind. I mean, rather than just this topic. I mean, we have been seeing a lot of push of policy, whether it's right or wrong, but we've been seeing a lot of push towards recycling of plastic. What I would rather like to see is also a policy push towards innovation and creation of alternate materials. other than just simply trying to recycle plastic in the first place. And I agree, it might take time. Like Dr. Habu said, that a lot of these solutions which are still out there have already started coming out and not scalable. I appreciate that, but I find it hard to believe, at least I'm optimistic about it, that there would not even be a single material which could come out, through our innovation, which could act as an effective alternate to plastic, at least in food packaging, if not in other areas.
Exactly. And lastly, Dr. Habu, since you are the expert and you have already given a lot of your suggestions, but if you could just conclude your recommendations or action items there as well.
Thank you. I see the, between all the drafts that are coming and amendments that are coming, I do see the government's resolve or trying to kind of declutter the whole thing and give direction to it. So the intentions are good, and the clarifications are also coming. For example, the August amendment that came, which gave very nice definition. We may agree with that or not, but at least they identified the SUPs. Otherwise, it was just going a hazy talk, SUP. At least now we have a list to say what is what. So, and similarly, the EPR draft that has come is also in a very good direction. They're bringing clarity and everything. But what is probably happening, and which I'm not able to put my fingers on, is what is it that suddenly there are these jarring points that are coming. Allowing of food, recycled plastic for food is something which is inexplicable. And I'll tell you why. Even FSSAI, until as late as 12th of February, I forget the dates, 2020, they have prohibited the use of, recycled plastics for packaging of food as late as 2020. So even assuming, because the environment minister has said them that they are dragged into it, it's like a dentist forcing a cardiologist to take a decision whether stent dalna hai ya nahi dalna hai. It is not the Ministry of Environment that should be kind of leading the conversations. If there is a newer evidence coming that it's all safe no matter what you do, then you can open it up for this thing. Mind you, FSSAI, that regulation also prohibits the use of tin also, recycled tin for the packaging of food. Tin and plastics recycled, if you read that thing. So if FSSAI until 2020 has been careful and cautious, and correctly so, to prevent use of recycled material for food packaging, if they again switch it back and kind of under the label of we have reviewed it and now we have seen it, in my opinion, it is under duress or some kind of expediency, which as a person, I will be very circumspect to look at it, that. And besides, what is the great rush of, or insisting on, having food grade? The same recycled material can, for example, let's take the case of PET bottle. They can be recycled into polyester fibers. What is the harm? In terms of circularity, what is the six principles of circularity? What is the one principle? It says that you prolong the use of the life. Textiles are thrown after 20, 30 years, unlike bottles. So why are the insistence of bottle to bottle karna bhi, and give the permission to food brands that if you are able to, let's say, have put 100 grams of PET into market, if you can show us that you have 100 grams of, you have converted that PET bottles into fibers, polyester fibers, you allow them. And or you allow them if they say if those bottles are used for, let's say, home care application, sanitizer bottles, anything that does not come into contact with food, you allow them. So that way you promote recycling also, yet stay away from food contact, which I would repeat, and I would like to end the talk. Even Europe is going very cautiously. Fools rush in where angels tread to fear. Thank you.
Please, or anybody want to do that. So anyways, concluding our entire session, I would like to thank all of you all for taking time out for this. It has been longer than we thought. Our key takeaways would anyways include the same here, that, although this amendment that has come up with a lot of rush and unexpectedly is obviously a concern for many, because this needs a lot of time and careful consideration in terms of, the standards, the technology involved, and, there are various parameters that needs to be considered before this recycled plastic is let in for use of, packaging food and drinks. So, and FSSAI and all the other bodies and the ministries need to rethink over this. They need to actually kind of rework and understand, why they are so crucial, and this really needs not to be rushed. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for taking your time out for us.